Boys don't become men simply by getting older. They must be shown the way. They must be initiated into manhood by other men. They need brothers. The world may be collapsing, but God is raising up good men to raise good men. It's one of the great God movements of our time, and you can be part of it. On the Dragon Slayers podcast, we interview ordinary men with extraordinary tales of conquering their fears and becoming fearless, loving men of God. Through their stories, you will hear rich wisdom, practical advice, and the value of brotherhood so you can stand out as a man among men. Warning, we will not mince words. We believe soft men and soft advice slay no dragons. So prepare yourself like a man. This is the Dragon Slayers podcast. Danny Silk.
Buddy.
This is your episode, man.
I know. We're finally...
We made it. We made it to the Danny Silk episode.
We're here. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
I was going to be here anyway.
I know.
Yeah.
It'd be weird if you weren't.
Yeah. It would.
It's so fun to be on the opposite side of this table talking with you. And I'm just going to brag on you a little bit because you, in the way you intro people, you share a little about who they are and their character. My favorite thing to say to people about you is you were who I thought you were going to be, but better. You know, I followed you from afar before I knew you. I had a Mount Rushmore of guys that I followed, that I paid attention to. It was John, Dave, Don, right? John Maxwell, Dave Ramsey, Donald Miller. And I was looking from things that they did in their life to pour into me. And that fourth one, that head up there, was Danny. And that's what the person I learned, like, oh, this guy's teaching me about relationships.
You're going to say Abe Lincoln?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's not even on the real one.
No?
Is he? Oh, no, it's a history. Now we're looking like fools. I don't think he's on the Mount Rushmore. I'll have to go to South Dakota. I'll have to do a Slayers trip out there. But what I learned was those guys that I followed from afar, it was tough because I only followed them from afar. And I never really knew them, although I felt that I did because I read about them and listened to them so much. And so having read your books and allowed your influence to my life through those mediums, to be able to first meet you, then actually to work with you and do life with you, partner with you in things, it is one of the greatest honors in my life. So I'm so excited to be on a table talking with you.
Well, it's good to be here.
Yeah. I think as Christians sharing that, I'm sitting here thinking this is such a common experience for you. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many men have either told me about you, sounds something like that, or how many men have probably told you, and men in particular. There's lots of women that have said something similar too, but I think the company of men that are gaining strength from you in some way, whether it's in person or some medium that he's describing, is just growing. Which then we started a podcast, and you wrote a book on Dragon Slayers for men, so it's just going to get bigger and bigger. But I think, you know, to state the obvious, I'm obviously one of those, being your son in love for 20 plus years now, and
yes, you are.
Just the example that you have set forward and put out there as a standard bearer for what a husband, father, man looks like in ministry, in work, in all the areas, in the house, is just powerful, helpful, and so inspiring. Even knowing where you came from. And I think we want to start with your story in just a minute. Before we get there, I think one of the questions I have, which we wouldn't get to hear very much, is what happens inside of you when you hear these kind of things? When men come up to you and say, thank you so much. You have no idea what your life has meant for me or how much it's helped. What happens to you?
Well, I'm obviously I'm humbled and I'm grateful, and you know, and it feels like when you make a 1,000-yard rifle shot, you know, and you hear that ding, you're like, I was aiming for that. You know, there was plenty of chance to miss, and I hit it. So I do feel like, you know, my life is aimed at that, and every time I hear it, it's, you know, it's nourishing to me. You know, I feel like I'm on target. And
That's great.
I don't think about getting that result, but when I get that result, I'm always this like, ding.
Yep.
It's
working.
It feels great.
Sweet.
What are you thinking about? Because going back to it was the intention,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious in what result were you hoping for or thinking about?
More sending it that way,
Mm.
More like, how can I help? What's the problem we're solving? What do guys need? What do people need? What do couples need? What do parents need? How can we solve that problem? So it's affirming, but I'm really thinking about the shot, not so much the repeat. But I love it. I do love it.
That reminds me of the thing you always talk about, this idea of, the person you could control, your half of that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes sense that you would, I'll send it out.
Mm-hmm.
My intention is to do a good job with me putting it out there, because I can't control what anybody else is going to do with it out there.
Right.
But that ding is when someone comes up and said, hey, that shot you sent, you hit the target.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, let's jump back in the pause for a minute to find out how we got here. How was Danny Silk made?
Wow. Backseat of a car, I heard.
I see what you got there. I see what I said wrong.
And that's how you got on Earth too. You came out in the back seat of the car. You were delivered in the front seat of the car.
On the freeway, but this is about Danny right now.
Yeah. Mom and dad were really, really young. Mom was 18 when she got pregnant. My dad was 19. He was in the Marine Corps, was in there for a couple of years, got out. Within a couple of years, they were divorced. And so a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old brother. And my mom, 2 years later, moves from Southern California to Northern California, Weaverville. And so she shows up and she's about 23 years old, so a 23-year-old woman in a small town, brand new, so she's popular, and she's looking for a daddy for her 2 little boys, and that's not what they're looking for, so so lots of guys, like when I was doing my master's program, I remember writing down a list of names of I had to write this 20-page autobiography, and I started writing down this list of names of men that I could remember their names that lived with us between the time I was 7 and 12 years old. And I stopped writing at 30. Like, I could remember these guys' names when I was 32 years old. So that's the parade of men who influenced me as a boy. When I'm 12, my mom marries a guy, and he was the closest thing to a father I remember, really. He was around for 3 years. They divorced when I was 15, but 12 to 15, those are formative years, so he taught me how to work. I had chores. I was feeding 70 rabbits every morning before school and 70 rabbits when I got home. We had chickens and pigs and turkeys and a big garden. I learned to split firewood. I learned how to hunt. He'd take me out hunting. And so those were 3 open the window for me masculine years. And then he disappeared pretty close to when I was 15, and my mom moved in with another guy, and so I left home when I was 16 and moved in with my girlfriend at the time. So my mom's living out of town, and I was still going to high school, so I moved in with my girlfriend, her mom, her mom was blind. They lived in a single wide in a trailer park, and it sounds like a country song. It's
It
not.
does.
I'm not trying to. I'm just saying that. I graduated high school living there, and then this girl and I had an apartment. And then that lasted about probably a year maybe. And then I was just out of control till I was about 21. And then I got saved, and everything changed when I got saved, Just previous to getting saved, when I was 19, I got a call from my mom, and she said, "I'm moving to Wyoming. Your brother doesn't want to go. Can he live with you?" So Johnny's 15. He comes to live with me. I'm 19, and he lives with me, graduates high school. When he first showed up, he's a sophomore in high school, and he had poor grades the last semester of the last year. And he wants to play football. And that's pretty much why he's on this planet, is to play football. And they won't let him. So I go down there. I'm 19 years old, and I'm in the principal's office. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You're not going to let this kid's going to drop out of high school. This kid's going to end up in prison. You got to let him." So they gave him a probationary start as a junior, and he was all league guard and all league linebacker, played both ways the whole game. He was just born for that. But I'm the advocate in the office, and I'm the guy that's doing what I can to, give him a chance.
Quick question right there. Is that one of the, I've heard this story before. I knew I was going to ask about that moment with the office if you didn't say it, but is that one of the earliest memories you have where you were the advocate for someone else? Like, was that a normal thing growing up? Did you find yourself in that situation, or is this kind of where it?
Yeah, probably. That's a good point. I don't remember being anyone else's advocate.
Yeah.
I don't remember that being I wasn't even my own advocate. I probably had a relationship with the junior or the vice principal, Mr. Dunt, or Mr. Gosh, I forgot his name now. But yeah, he is probably probably that relationship I could draw on, and thought it would make a difference. And I was kind of desperate to help my brother, because I knew that this was not going to turn out well if he didn't get to play sports and have some reason to manage himself inside the parameters of school.
It's just interesting, and those that know you and know part of your story, it's like something was almost unlocked right there. Like this thing came out of you, like I'm actually his champion. He needs a champion right now, and that's me. It's awesome.
Yeah. I guess I never really noticed that before, but that's probably where it started.
Yeah.
The other thing that highlights for me is another superpower of yours is to see a problem coming that other people might not see, the deeper problem or a bigger problem. At 19, I try to remember being at 19. I don't think I would have the foresight to go, if I have my brother live with me and then, go like, "Oh, this guy loves football. If he's not doing football, he might get into trouble. He'll be doing these things. So I need to go actually be the advocate, because there's a bigger problem coming." And, getting to do life with you all the time, I see you do that on the daily. This idea of, you'll say, "We need to be doing this." And I go, "I feel like we shouldn't be doing that." I go, "Oh, no, we need to be doing that." Okay, tell me why we need to be doing that. And then you walk it out, and I go, "We should be doing that. Let's go do that thing you said."
Yeah. I'll unsend all those emails. Yeah.
I'll unsend. Sorry for what I said about you.
But the other thing I wanted to touch on, because you said those formative years. Let's go back to that. Your stepdad, and those formula, and he taught you how to work hard and get feeding the rabbits and all that sort of thing. Sometimes when I see like YouTube clips, or I see certain things, it's almost like we boil masculinity down to just that. Like there is a benefit, of course. Like you're talking about it as a benefit. I see it as a benefit, but if it just stays there, because that's about, like that's the extent. It's like hard work and chores, and it taught me how to hunt, so I got some skills, and this was great. But what were you still missing in a father figure that's above or different than just teaching you how to work hard and do these kind of manly things?
Mm-hmm. Pretty much how to see myself in the presence of a man.
Hmm.
I didn't have much experience there. Growing up, pretty much just learned to be a small target. You got that much traffic rolling through your house and your life. You just become a small target because they're here today, gone tomorrow, and you can't really form a bond. Dell shows up in my life, and he's a dad. I mean, he's a man presence in the house, and he's making a demand and shaping our family culture, and we're all following him around, and so I got 3 years of that, and then it was gone.
Mm.
And so I think, I've always had kind of a invisible place in my life around other men. Like, how do I do this? What it's because I didn't play sports, I didn't, I wasn't on a team. I didn't go to university. I wasn't in the military. I don't have this socialization with men. So, where do you get that? Well, normally you would get it in the presence of your dad and or, brothers. Well, I got a brother that's 4 years behind me. So I'm not learning from him. So who am I learning this stuff? Who am I learning man lessons from? Well, a whole bunch of guys I don't want to be like someday.
Mm-hmm.
So it really doesn't show up in my life until I get saved. And then boom, I am surrounded by a bunch of guys that inspire me and a bunch of guys that I want to be like.
Love that.
I heard a story recently. One of our Dragon Slayer guys, Jake Veach, told this story to race through real quick, just to make this point you're hitting on. Is he met with a man who's 72 years old, and they were working some things out, and Jake asked this question. He said, "Are you scared of me?" And the man said, "I'm terrified." So where's that come from? He said, "I've never known how to talk to men. I've never had the ability or confidence to actually talk to men." He's 72 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And through this kind of repentant conversation, finally, this man just bursts into tears and is repenting to Jake for how he's treating him, asking for forgiveness, and now they're reconnecting. This man's restoration. And Jake said it looked like he was being initiated in manhood.
Yeah, at 72.
72 years old.
Wow.
And I just think you're making that point for a minute there, like you didn't know how to be around other men. It feels more common than maybe we're even aware.
Yeah, I think it's one of the casualties of fatherlessness, really, is that you just don't have any man lessons. And as a girl, a daughter, she doesn't have any tools in the toolbox to relate to a man. So there's so much neglect that happens in that situation where you're just ill-equipped for the next giant chunk of your life.
So 21, you get saved.
Mm-hmm.
That's some
You
keys
said
coming.
you ran into some people.
Yeah.
That you're like, oh, I might want to be like that guy.
Yeah. The first thing that happened is I got saved and I changed in a moment. I changed on the spot.
Wow.
I went from dead to alive, and I felt it. I felt it in every fiber in my being. I couldn't say 5 sentences without F-bombing my way through it. I couldn't talk without cussing. I was, my goal in life was to be Richard Pryor. I wanted to be, because I could make people, when I got stoned, I could make so many people laugh. Stoned people laugh easy, but I was hilarious. And, I really thought that's where, I would end up someday is, trying to be funny. But my mouth And in a day, it left.
Wow.
I smoked pot every day for years. It went away in a moment. And so my house, my little brother's still living with me, and my house goes from party central to Bible study. And my brother's like, what the heck are you doing? You ruining everything, man. I'm a senior in high school. Are you kidding me? This is the year. This is the year we party hardy, Marty. And I was like, not here, man. That's not happening here. And so that kind of blew up our relationship. He's still living with me, but and then I decide to get together with Sherry and get married, and he turns 18, and I'm 22, and he's got to go, so he goes in the army, and we're all blown up, and he's hurt, and you left me. You left me. And it's like, oh. So, but I meet these amazing humans that are men of God that are leading their families and loving their wives and raising their children. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. I mean, you guys are husband and wife and 3 kids, and these are the only parents those kids have ever known. And you too? And you too? Are you kidding me? Is this where they all live? They all live in this building called a church? Because I don't know any families like this. All the families I know are all busted up and, living with your mom, and you got 3 kids and they all got a different dad. And or you're living with your dad and your sister's living with your mom. And what is happening? So all of a sudden I'm inspired by families, really.
Yeah. And what, when talking about kind of the man piece and you referenced earlier, like, I didn't know how to act around men. And it sounded like you're moving towards something shifted at 21 when you met these men.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the qualities or things that began to stand out to you? Like, oh, that's what my life's going to look like now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd never heard a sermon before. I'd never heard a guy stand in front of a group of people.
Wow.
And tell them about character. Tell them about God. I had no idea what this Bible was about. I had no idea what this church thing was about. I had just no idea. So to sit and listen to Bill Johnson explain worship, what it is, why we do it, what we're doing, what's happening while we're doing it, who God is, and I'm just drinking in. I feel like a desert that's it's raining and it's just soaking into me. Like, I've never heard anything like this. I've never heard anybody tell me about themselves like this. He's telling me how much he loves his wife and his role as a husband and as a man of God and as a father, and how he interacts with his kids. And I'm just enamored with who this guy is. And then I find he's surrounded by a bunch of guys that are trying to do what he's talking about. And they're way down the road from me. And I'm just, I'm just waddling along back of the pack. I got nothing. I got no wife. I got no kids. I got no knowledge of what you guys are talking about. And Kris Vallotton was there, and I'd worked with Kris when I was 16 years old. So I'm 16. Kris comes to work in the same tire store that I'm in. He's a mechanic in the back with the alignments and the tune-ups, and I'm out front changing tires. And he's a Christian, and I'm living with my girlfriend. And I'm selling pot, and I am living large. I am just happy as a clam. I'm free as a bird. And he's over here telling me, you need Jesus. You need Jesus. You need to come to church. And I'm like, you need to get away from me. And so I'm just trying to get as far away from this guy as I can for 5 years, really. I mean, it was probably just a couple of years, because then he left. I left, and then he left. But we're still in Weaverville, and I'd see him. And he's always razzing me about going to church, and I'm like, oof, like. So it did come down to that, though. I went and found him when I heard the Father calling me. I went and found Kris, and I said, "Dude, how do I go to church?"
Wow.
And he said, "What do you mean? How do you go to church?" I said, "Well, I can't just walk in there." He says, "Yeah, you can." I said, "I can just walk into a church. They're going to just let me walk in." He goes, "Yeah." "Okay, I'll meet you in the parking lot." I go, "Okay." So I showed up, and I go in, and preacher preaches the message. Everybody's leaving. I'm just standing there. I see Kris up front. I go up there. I go, "Hey, I want to do the thing." He goes, "What? What thing?" I go, "I don't know. Isn't there some thing you do when you come to church? You want to get saved?" "I don't know."
You tell me.
He says, "Bill, come here. This guy wants to get saved." And so I prayed the prayer with Bill and Kris, and
come on.
That was it, man. It happened that day, that moment. Everything was different. You know? And these guys all became my model of what it meant to be, a man of provision, a man that would nourish the environment. And I just soaked it up. I mean, every one of those men were people I wanted to be like.
Hey man, if you're wondering what it takes to be a Dragon Slayer, you're going to want to get Danny's new book, The Way of the Dragon Slayer, 7 Reasons Men Need Brothers. Inside its pages is going to be rich wisdom and practical advice on what it means to be a man of virtue and restore masculinity in our time. So go to dragonslayers.co, that's dragonslayers.co, and get your copy now.
I've heard this story again numerous times. There's so much to it, I think, that we're missing because we don't have so much time here. But what's the adjustment that's happening inside of you that's going from, I was going this direction, and I think it's you've already said it, it's Jesus, like something changed with Jesus. But what's happening inside of your mind? This is a while ago, so I'm not sure how much you can recall, but there's these adjustments taking place that's beginning to build the character and build the things that you're so admiring in them. Because I think this is one of the places that I love helping men and want to see men do, but we get stuck here often is, no, I want to get there, but I don't know how to close that gap.
Mm-hmm.
How do I close that gap between where I am and where I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
And there's all these adjustments taking place for you that the Danny Sook we see today started back there and had to say yes. And I think even part of my question is, you're receiving probably lots of feedback and learning from these people that you put yourself around,
mm-hmm.
which takes humility. Like you must have become humble quickly.
I shut my mouth, like I wasn't even funny anymore. Like I didn't know how to be funny and not F-bomb stuff, and not just be foul and disgusting. I did not know how to be funny. So I wasn't funny for a couple of years.
Needed new material.
Totally. I didn't even know. I was scared to be funny.
Yeah.
So I just sat and watched and listened, and I garnered favor with man and with God. I just looking back, I would just say I was showing them what I was learning, and I was doing everything that I could to protect my new relationships. And I was being enculturated. I didn't even know it, but I was learning the language. I was learning the accent. I was learning the customs. And it was full on. I mean, I was in church every day somehow. I was at somebody's house. I got off work and I went over to either Kris or the Cluses or the Derryberries or the Harpers or the Johnsons. I went over to somebody's house every day. They had home groups everywhere. They had something going on. And it was just so many times we were just all together playing the guitar, worshiping. Somebody was telling a story out of the Bible that I'd never heard before, or I had just read, and I thought God was talking to me because I just read the story and he's talking to them too. And I was just so inspired by everybody because I was just, I'd never seen anything like it. I never felt so safe. I never felt so hopeful. And I think maybe for the first time I had some sense of purpose.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I heard you say part of the learning was I shut my mouth, I listened, and I showed him I was listening by the way I was acting. Something in there you touched on that I've wondered so many times. I think I've arrived at the answer, but I'll let you answer it. There's so many times you talked about you were being enculturated. I wasn't even aware. Like I was being enculturated. I was being taught this stuff just being around it. I don't know how many times I've walked away from your office or just a conversation with you, and I'll go and I'll work through something, and I'll think to myself, did Danny know what he was doing right there? Did this just it felt like I'll arrive at a place and I go, oh, Danny set me up over here. I was like, I wonder if he knows. Like, is he have this plan or a checklist box that he's working me through, that he has some kind of system for developing me, or is it really just happening? Is it just I'm just around him and it's happening? So it's like, were those guys oh, okay, we have a new guy to help make a man, like we got to run him through these things. Is that how it works, or is it, what's going on there?
Yeah, I think it's what happens when you're around consistent people. When you're just around people that command themselves in a particular direction and discipline, you just get sucked into their stream, and you're now following them, and pretty soon you arrive where they're going. And yeah, I remember sitting in men's meetings with Bill. Bill would be teaching all these guys, and if you can just imagine, you're Bill Johnson teaching a small group of men about being men of God. I had that experience. That's in my foundation, where Bill is undistracted by a global stage, and he's in Weaverville sitting with 15 men in a cafe that's opened up just for this, and I'm just watching them ask questions and talk, and I'm just in the room while it fills up with smoke, and now I smell like smoke, and I just like, this is amazing, and I didn't know how amazing it was. I just was being transformed. Wow. And yeah, it's such a gift. And then that was only about 2 years of that, and then Sherry and I got married and we left, and we were gone for 9 years. I was going to school and having kids, and had a career I was pursuing, got my master's degree, thought I was going to be a therapist. And then boom, 1 year into my internship, Bill Johnson calls. I end up back in Weaverville, and now I'm the pastor. I'm replacing Jesus. I can't believe it. I probably, at the first 5 years of my Christian life, when I prayed, God answered in Bill's voice.
Yeah. Sure.
Like, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. It's just.
So there's a part of that story you just mentioned. For me, it's one of my favorite stories you share before you come back. One, just a little glimpse, give people a little glimpse of that 9 years, what your life looked like what you were doing in your community, what you were serving, how your family was involved in all that. But the where I really want you to land is in your master's program, the guy you were working for, and that conversation you had when you told him you got called to do something else.
Yeah, we left Weaverville to go to work for this agency called Ramey Vista, and they had these group homes with 6 teenagers, either all boys or all girls, and a rotating staff. There was house parents that were there 5 days a week, and then they'd leave on their days off, and the relief staff would come in, and the relief staff would work 2 houses. So we started as relief staff, and we worked these 2 houses and gave the house parents their time off. So we would work this house for 2 days, this house for 3 days, and then we would go on our days off. So we moved 3 times a week, right? While I went to school full time, and we had 1 and 2 children, and Sherry was pregnant with Taylor when we left. But we did that for 5 years. And Ramey Vista is paying for my education. They're investing in me as a future executive at this agency that had 3 regions in the North State. And John Tillery was like he was my second Bill Johnson. He was this man of God that was just so wise and so generous and so humble and so smart. And he had a just a kind of a corporate apostolicness about him. I didn't even know. I couldn't have framed it like that back then, but he was just this huge man like Bill. And he's the one that talked me into going to school. I thought I had a learning disability. I thought something's wrong with me, man. You don't want me going back to school. So I took one class and I got an A. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a learning disability. I just never tried, and that's a real disability, when you don't ever try. And so all of a sudden I tried and I'm nailing these A's and I'm like, I'm back, Yeah. So I get my master's degree. I'm going to work in the counseling center at Raimi Vista. I'm in the C-suite, I'm up there in I'm a program director. And I'm like, okay, this is headed to where I thought it was going. And then boom, I get a call, Bill wants me to come be his associate pastor. And I can't believe it. I can't believe that Bill Johnson is asking me to come help him. And it stops me in my tracks. And I asked John to go to lunch with Sherry and we're sitting there. And I said, Kris, John, I don't know what to do. James Dobson could have called and I wouldn't have gone.
Mm.
Billy Graham could have called and I wouldn't have gone. Bill Johnson? Oh my gosh, what do I do? And I said, here's what's going on. I know that what you've invested in me, and I know what you're hoping that investment's going to pay off. And, what do you think? And he says, if anything that I've done up until this point has helped prepare you for who God has called you to be and what he has for you, then I consider it an honor. And I release you from any obligation that you have to me or to Raimi Vista. I was like, so you're leaving this up to me. And I really felt like this was what the Lord was saying. And so we did. We left and we went to Weaverville and worked with Bill for about 2 months. And then he left. He left and went to Bethel, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
It's
such a marking conversation.
Yeah.
With John.
Yeah. Such a father response.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think the conversation happens because of the covenant relationship that you have with Bill. Every time we share that, anyone could have called.
Yeah.
But Bill Johnson called.
Yeah.
Which I think begins to move into even why Dragon Slayers is here. And the conversation we have all the time about Dragon Slayers is men creating covenant with other men.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like a bunch of this started for you back there.
Yeah.
With Bill and Kris, just as you tell your stories. But what if you were to even unpack some of that, maybe it's what is covenant, first of all, and then how did that come alive for you?
Well, I think covenant is, when I would teach it, there's a slide that says that covenant is a binding agreement that requires death.
Mm.
And so in the old covenant, there would be these sacrifices that, would be to testify of Israel's covenant with God, or, that they would just reinforce it through these sacrifices. And even the act of circumcision is, there's, a death, if you will. And there's I think there's a commitment that I'm going to let someone else influence my decisions. Like when you get married, or when you have a covenant relationship with a brother or a sister, you very much are saying to them that you can change my mind. I think I've made a decision, but I've come here for your input. And when you have a covenant relationship with somebody and they say, I think this is a terrible idea, it stops you in your tracks, and you really reconsider deeply, like, okay, well, I wouldn't do anything to injure this relationship, so I'll adjust. I learned this from watching or from learning that Bill's side of his family, I think it went 5 generations back of ministers. And then on Benny's side, it was like the same. So, they are carrying the gospel through the generations of their family. And by the time they get to us in Weaverville, we're looking at, centuries of revival and just legacy and inheritance. And this is where I learned generational thinking and generational paradigm and what wealth actually is. And so that landed on me as kind of an identifier that this guy is my father. This guy I'm tied to that. That's, in essence, that's being born into an eternal kingdom with people that think like that in Weaverville. Like, who'd have thought? What is happening? What are the odds that I would cross paths with that? And how many people don't? How many people don't get the faithfulness of covenant leaders in their life? So many. I mean, I've only had this. That's all I've ever known in 40 years. This is my church experience. And I've talked to so many people who've been so beat up by people who are inconsistent, who are unfaithful, who are not covenant leaders. And it's hard. It's, I feel super thankful and grateful to have this legacy.
Staying on the topic of covenant and consistent, one of my favorite covenant relationships you have is with Sherry Silk.
Faux show.
She's the best. If people have followed us any length of time, they've probably heard some of your story. Like, I think she was saved either same day or very close to when you were like your
month before.
Yeah, your Jesus journey and your relationship. Like, it's such a beautiful thing what you've created. I'm interested right now to hear a little bit more about what that looks like right now. What your commitment and what that covenant relationship looks like now after decades of marriage and what you're walking through.
Well, this year, 2024 will be 40 years.
Come
married, on. So that's a miracle. That's it's almost surreal to hear myself say that. I kind of feel like I'm outside my body right now looking at me. 40 years of marriage, and it's, I mean, it is the fruit of both of us deciding, what, we're gonna be covenant people. We've told that story so many times, but essentially, we have both sets of parents and a stepfather. All have been married 3 times. 15 marriages right there, and then our early premarital assessment comes back as incompatible, clinically incompatible. So there's zero reason that this should be our 40th year together.
Yeah.
Zero. Except that we both were so impacted by people of covenant.
Wow.
Yeah. There was even a note on the clinical incompatibility that you
Dude,
got later on.
Bill, do whatever you can to stop this marriage. And that's professional advice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Or they will become the people that teach the world about marriage.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. Or they'll slay some dragons
That's right.
out of those people.
Come on.
You think Bill missed that, or you think he saw it and didn't threw it away?
I'm just going to have to attribute it to Bill just has hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Powerful hope. That's awesome.
Powerful hope.
I think one of the stories worth sharing is Sherry's recent journey she's been on. I say Sherry's, but it's both you and lots of people impacted by it. But there's some keys in there, I think, as a man and as a husband that you've learned, that we've gotten to hear about, that I think play into this conversation and feel really important. But just give a quick picture of that, and then something you learned from Sherry's journey.
Yeah. February 23rd, 2022, we found out that Sherry had a cancerous tumor in her right breast. And, it was pretty powerless feeling, pretty scary, pretty overwhelming moment. We were all in the kitchen that night, and she's telling us that the biopsy came back positive, been malignant, and we're like, whew. That was hard. That's probably the hardest thing I can remember ever, was all of that moment. In that moment, like, what in the heck are we doing? That's followed by months of chemotherapy, Sherry being just so sick and in so much torment and so much pain. And, it was, and then we go from that to surgeries, and she's so beat up, so wounded, and so sick. And that took a year. That first year, at the end of that first year was all the reconstruction surgeries. And so that took time. And, it was really, really a lot, and I could feel it in the first days of that approaching, where I started, I could feel my self-preservation kicking on. Like, my whole life is going to be consumed by this. What am I going to do? I'm going to have to cancel everything. I'm going to have to do everything a different way. I'm going to have to, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to be there every step of the way. At the same time, I have to make a living. I can't just stop. And I could feel all my selfishness, and all my, what about me, come into the surface. And I just heard the Lord say, it's her birthday, and I thought, no, October's her birthday. It's a little early, and then I realized, when it is her birthday, for whatever reason, on her birthday, it's all about her. So, it's all about her. Anything she wants, I don't have a no in me. I don't have I don't have a selfish bone in my body on her birthday. For whatever reason, it's all you, baby. And I realized, this is the armor that I needed. Was it's her birthday today. And I just wake up every day. 2 years later, it's her birthday still. She's had her birthday every day for 2 years. And like, that really shifted something in me deep, practicing that every day.
Wow.
It's her birthday. You know, we're doing all the stuff we did and all the things we're doing, and it's her birthday. And it doesn't mean that, you know, I don't speak the truth in love, and I don't, you know, I don't tell her what I need if I need something, but it reframes it all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a totally different starting point. You know, it's her birthday, and that's what I'll operate out of. So, probably the greatest compliment I've ever got in my life, I got from my wife about a month ago, maybe.
Ooh,
Yeah,
fresh.
Maybe pretty fresh. I think we were with Kris and Kathy. So we must have been up in Reading for something, and Sherry was saying, she was telling her story, and somebody, I don't think maybe it was a Kris, it was somebody said, well, how did Danny do through this whole thing? And she says, you know, Danny's an Enneagram 7, you know, so he doesn't like pain. And I'm thinking, well, what number likes pain? You know, is there a number that likes pain? And she's like, you know, and he shuts down. He just tries to figure out a way to get away from it. And she says, you know, he this whole time he didn't respond out of his personality. He responded out of his character.
Come on.
Ooh. And I thought, okay, I can die and go to heaven. Somehow I have finally got through to this woman.
The woman I love thinks I'm amazing.
40 years later.
Paid off. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was super awesome.
One of the questions we're asking all Dragon Slayers, you included, and we'll still stay on that Sherry topic, is the greatest contribution that you give to Sherry.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say that is?
I choose you.
Hmm.
I choose you. It always just comes back. Everything comes back to I choose you. And that's my job. You know, she can't control any of that on my side. And so my full, no holds barred, I choose you is, I think that's my commitment. You know, she'll never have to worry about my side of our relationship. Yeah, it's my job, and I choose you. And that's everything I can give her.
Mm.
You know?
Somebody's writing that down right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It should be.
That's great. Yeah.
And it's been written down somewhere.
Yeah.
Should go get that book.
Yeah,
you should get that book.
Yeah, there's
I'm sitting there thinking we should do a second second episode with Danny, because we didn't really cover much.
Yeah.
It's like we just got started.
I'm old.
Well, it's not where I was going, but sure.
All this has been going on a long time.
You got lots of stories.
Season 7. Yeah.
But I think there's two questions, and I'm gonna let you decide which one you want to answer. But one is, and you may dismiss this one because maybe it's hard to answer. Do you have a most fun or greatest adventure you've been on? Just the trips you've taken, all these great things you've done. Is there one that stands out like that one really stands out? The second question is, could you spend a few minutes on Dragon Slayers? Why we're here and what we're doing? This whole thing originated with you. I think some of the stories you're sharing today have contributed to this story and this Dragon Slayer lore that we're on, as you put it. But yeah, so you can probably go with whichever direction you would like to.
Well, I think I'll do the second one just because we're probably running out of time here.
Yep,
but you know, I was traveling a lot, and I felt like a man on a treadmill. You know, a treadmill. You know, I'm just running, trying to make an impact, and I ended up feeling more like I was, you know, throwing grass seed out of an airplane instead of planting orchards, you know. And I ran into a story that Paul Young, the author of The Shack, he had a buddy that had spent some time with Billy Graham, and Billy's in his early 90s at the time of this conversation. And the guy asked Billy, if you had anything to do over again, would you change anything? He says, "Oh yeah, I would gather up 12 men and I would pour my life into them." And that hit me so hard because I felt even more ineffective. Because I'm in a room full of people and I'm saying the same things over and over to to different groups of people. I'm really not building any momentum with very many people. And I started downshifting shortly after that conversation and started formulating, how would I do that? How would I choose 12 men? Because I know hundreds of men. I know hundreds of really great guys, really famous guys. I thought, well, I don't think that's what this is about. So I just started to really pray and think about who would I get. And immediately, I got guys coming to mind, and these guys, these crazy men in Alaska were at the front of my thought, like, yeah, these guys have a covenant. They're covenant men, and they're some of the manliest men I know. These guys are godly men.
Yeah.
And they inspire me. And then I started thinking about you guys, guys I'm hanging out with all the time, and Bob, and then it just kind of evolved into, well, let's create. I don't even know where Dragon Slayers came from. I don't remember the name, in particular, other than I think we were talking about, somebody must have said, we just have to slay our dragons, and I thought, cling, that's going to stay. That's going to sink in. And, and then it just became a gathering method at that point until I got to 12 and the model, which was they get 12 and they get 12 and they get 12. And pretty soon, we're in the millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. You're like, okay, that's a movement.
Yeah.
That'll leave a mark. That feels like an orchard. That feels like fruit that remains. And it doesn't need me on a hamster wheel. It just needs me being me, which I can do. I want to do. I just want to be me being me, and I want everybody else to be them being them. I learned kind of crazy conference ministry, and it's got its place, but there's only a short shelf life on that.
Yeah.
And you're just fried. So this feels different. This feels like let's have a whole bunch of guys running together.
Yeah.
And so excited for the book to come out.
That's awesome.
I'm excited for the podcast to fire up and get going, and just see what the Lord does, and do everything I can to stay off that hamster wheel. One of the good things about getting older is you just like, I ain't doing that again.
This feels like to bring it full circle back to the beginning of that story. Yeah, one of the things you were saying about being saved, and this, like, I ran into Bill Johnson, and this happened in Weaverville of all places. Like, how did I end up right there? That's all that I knew. And if Dragon Slayers of men, brothers of 12 gathering together, and those guys gathering 12 guys, and the exponential growth of it, it won't be a weird incident or a 1 in a million chance that you're in your locale and you run into quality men who are fearless lovers and love Jesus and love their families and are awesome husbands and are great fathers. And it becomes a way that we can train up a generation of raise an army of fathers.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you, Danny.
Yep.
It's been awesome hanging out with you and talking with you. And
just getting started.
I know we are just getting started.
I know.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks.
You're the man.
It's been a pleasure, guys.
So good.